black storm coming. See the lightning strike. Black people rising.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. This is part 2 of a 2-part series that I was motivated on the first show to talk about based on certain incidents that happened this previous month. The first one was when Brother Kevin Hart made the statement that the Egyptians were black and got some pushback from the Egyptian government, the Arabs, that existed, that runs Egypt today, and saying that the Egyptians were not black. They didn't say it based on any facts. They just made that statement. During the first show, and also the other incident was this controversy going on about Cleopatra, but the original reason I wanted to do this show before those other two was I came across this incident that also showed that we are still not true, we're still ignorant to the truth of who African people were thousands of years ago. That Africa is to Egypt the way Europe is to Rome and Greece, the way China, ancient China, is to Asia. Africa has a place on this world map. I'm not making no conjecture. This show, I hope I showed some, made some headway in the first show. I'll just continue where I left off. Again, I showed a video of this gentleman, but which I won't show on this show. But if you want to go see it, then you'll see it in the first show. But he also wrote a book about his experience. This is Dr. Mustafa Hefni. He lived in Detroit, a professor, but he caught hell when he came here to America. He came in 1978. I think in the mid 1980s he put in for citizenship papers, but he was told that he was white. Now he's always seen himself as a black man in Egypt. But based on certain type of racist tropes that still exist embedded into the systems that control United States ideas, in the first show, I used the word that I defined to show what I'm talking about when it comes to how he sees himself and how the society, the system, defines him against his will. Okay, in Egypt, you're either a majority if you're a Muslim, or you're a minority if you are a Catholic, let's say, based on your religion. In America, they use this race definition, not based on any science, just based on racism of the 1700s and the 1800s who came up with these ideas of race. Basically white male Europeans who didn't do any experiment, didn't go out in the field, but just decided in their deaths that white people we're the superior race. That's all. And they call African-centered ways of thinking pseudoscience. No, it's not. It's based on facts. It's in relationship. It's a reaction to the lies that are said about people to justify enslavement and 246 years of enslavement, at least here in America, then another 100 years of apartheid, Jim Crow, segregation, apartheid, and then the last 50 or 60 years of dealing with the racism. And that the idea, there's a word that I used in the first part called zeitgeist. And zeitgeist, again, is the term that means ideas of the age. And the zeitgeist for the last 400 years about black people is that we didn't contribute anything into to the world. No civilization, nothing. That's the zeitgeist of the 1700s and the 1800s, and it still is embedded in the systems today. The zeitgeist is the way with that kind of information of black men being animals, not to be trusted, wild. Okay, all of these negative tropes that are said about us as people of African descent is embedded into the psyche. Then there's also another term that I use called implicit bias. And implicit bias is an embedded way, there's a definition out in there. It is a form of bias that occurs automatically and unintentionally that it nevertheless affects the judgment, decisions, and behaviors. You don't think it was an implicit bias in this recent case of a white male choking a black male in the subways of New York City that is the new controversy. Implicit bias, that white man most likely never even considered consciously of how he viewed that black man, or the police officer said, I feared for my life, or being a black man being shot 50 or 100 times by 10 police officers. This idea of the black savage, this idea of the Native American savage, this is the zeitgeist when it comes to who we are, and we have to change that. And we didn't control anything. Well, when Brother Kevin Hart said that black people built the pyramids, this visceral response from the Arabs, okay? Again, wrong. And that's what we're going to talk about on this one, this show, the second part. I talked about the Greeks, I left off where the Greeks thought about black people, the people that they saw in Egypt. They saw black people, and they claimed that they got all those things that we give them credit for in Western school thought. These are the things that the Greeks learned from black Egyptians. They said them themselves. We'll show these points. Geometry, mathematics, another form of mathematics, medicine, law, architecture, philosophy, all these came from Egypt. The Egyptians themselves wrote about it, said they got it from it, and you are told, no, it started with these guys. They never said it. The racists who put together the curriculums from the 17 and 1800s to justify slavery, to justify what the inhumane thing they're doing to these people of African descent who had great cultures on the west coast of Africa, the Mali Empire, the Songhai Empire, the great Ghana Empire, but somehow those things are forgotten. And you're using human body to build wealth in West. England didn't export nothing. What did England have? Coal, potatoes? Okay, wool maybe? How did they get so wealthy? On the backs of people that look like me or native people. But they can't say that. They had to come up with this crazy mythology that the Greeks and the Romans were the height of thought. No, the height of thought came from Mother Africa. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay? This, some of you might not know. For example, when I'm talking about math, you saw the top one. Strabo was a geographer who was very famous. He wrote and a philosopher he was around the time of the Roman Republic changing from a republic to a dictatorship under Julius Caesar. He was there around the time of Cleopatra, around the 63, 64 period of time. For example, geometry was invented, he wrote, it is said, from the measurement of land which is made necessary by the Nile when it confounds the boundaries. In other words, when it spills its bank. There's always been a flooding every year. The science then is believed to have come to the Greeks from the Egyptians. This is what Strabo said back in over 2,000 years ago. Math came from them. This is his understanding of where his people, the Greeks, got that. Okay, what it said. Okay, the zeitgeist of his time. Let's go to the next one. Now, many of you who've taken philosophy know about Strabos. I mean, not Strabos, it's the last one. Thales of Miletus, okay? He is considered the first of the great Greek philosophers. If you took Greek philosophy, you will know who Thales of Miletus was. All right, he made voyages to the priests, the astronomers of Egypt, and according to his biographers, he learned geometry from the Egyptians. This is Diogenes Laertius on Thales, page 24 and 43. Okay, he's the instructor, as it says in the first paragraph. Let's go on to the next one. Thales, the first philosopher. Okay. Now Pythagorean theorem He spent 22 years in Egyptian. He went through the Egyptian mystery system, 22 years. And I don't think he got all the information. He's the one who brought back all the different types of philosophy. He didn't bring it up himself. He got it from, of whom Pythagoras of Samos is one of, on a visit to Egypt. He became a student of the religion of the people and was first to bring to the Greeks all philosophies, and more conspicuously than others. He was seriously interested himself in the sacrifices and other ceremonies, purity. There was not even ceremonies. A lot of the ceremonies and processions that you associate with Greeks and the Romans came out of that's what they call her, Mother Africa. And even the Egyptians understood that they were not the oldest. There were societies, their origin story came even from the South. Let's go on. Yeah. Now, this is from Aristotle, who wrote Metaphysics, the book Metaphysics by Aristotle. The sciences which relate neither to the pleasure nor yet to the necessities of life were invented first in those places where men had leisure. Thus, the mathematical sciences originated in Egypt because there the priestly class had leisure. This is Aristotle, who was considered the greatest and the most polymath of the ancient Greek philosophers, saying in his book Metaphysics, which you can read, here's the pages, that the Egyptians priests are the ones who taught them. There's an old Greek saying that says you could fill a book of 1,000 pages with the name of Greeks who went to Egypt to learn. A book of 1,000 pages, okay, that could fill up with the names of Greeks who went to Egypt to learn. Okay, but while you are told that Greek philosophy or Greek history or Greek is the thing, it's always, that's the best that Western culture could do. In a sense, I'm not knocking the Greeks. They did what they did in Rome, but they were not their origin. They don't leave out the people that look like us. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, now, I told you in the first show, I showed you what some of the current scholars said, what some of the scholars of 100 years ago said. I also showed you during this two-part show what the Greeks said about where they got their information from. But what did the ancient Kemetic people? Now, I call them Kemetic because at the time of the pyramid building, that's what they called themselves. The word Egypt came from when the Greeks came into power. Egyptian and all that, those terminology. The language of Egypt at the time of the Bible was Greek, right? But that was 300 BC. 300 BC. The pyramids go back to 26,000, 2600 BC, or even older. I'm not really sure of that, but that's another story. Because the timeline that most modern Egyptologists go by is based on a priest that lived during the Greek time of Ptolemy, Philadelphus, called Manetho. And he wrote a history of Egypt, okay, for that foreign pharaoh. And it's based on his timeline that we use these numbers. These things could have been made even earlier than that, but we'll go with what everybody agree upon, the timeline of the Egyptian dynastic periods. Okay? Here is something that you might not even know, but that's what I'm saying. I'm bringing receipts about whether the blacks, Africans were Egyptian. They had a word for inner Africa. Okay, that's sub-Saharan Africa. That was Yah, Y-A-W, which means old or ancient. They're telling you that the ancient ones came from the south. They always oriented themselves to the south. That's their origin story. That's where they come from. The first dynastic period came from the south. The people which we call Nubia or Sudan today. Just like those pictures I showed you in the first show of the dark-skinned, blue-black people that you see right now in Sudan, that was called Nubia. They were the same to the Egyptian in complexion. They said that. That's where they came from. They called it, like, again, that word Yah means old, making Inner Africa the old country of origin. Inner Africa also was called Tarneter, the land of the gods, because they saw themselves coming from that. All that gods came from that south. Everything about the interior of Africa invoked in the Egyptians a sense of awe, reverence, and nostalgia. That's the Egyptians that produced awe, reverence, and nostalgia to later European, Macedonians, all the other people who invaded it for thousands of years afterwards. But they were in awe of their origin, and that's to the south. You were right, Brother Hart. Let's go on. The Egyptians called themselves Kemetu, okay, Kemetu, and their land Kemet, which means the black land. Now, some of these racist tropes say, well, they talk about the soil, the dirt that was brought down from the Nile. No, we'll get to that in a minute. Their name Kemetu means literally the blacks. They use the word Kente for people who live south of them, like the Nubians and people down in Khartoum area. That's what they call them, they're Kente. Like, it is the same name for first, foremost, origin, beginning, and so forth. Okay? That Kente, the first people. We come from you. That's the land of the gods, where we are origin. They ain't talking about the Mediterranean and those north. They had images of what they thought of those people in later dynastic periods when they came in contact with those who came south from, across the Mediterranean. Who they honored was the Kente, the people of the south. Let's go to the next one. Now, I'll explain this right here. Okay, this is what we call the hieroglyphics. These are the symbols. These are pictographs. In other words, each picture, each image has a sound to it. Okay, just follow me. Quick. I'm not an expert on hieroglyphic or metuneta, which is the true name, metuneta. That image on the top left hand to your screen is a burnt piece of chip, a burnt wood chip. That's blackened wood chip. Okay, and it made the sound of KM, chem. The owl there is another M. That's called a monoliteral, and that's called a biliteral, two words. That bit has two letters. That owl is a monoliterate that has one letter, okay? The other monoliterate was the upside down, I call it the upside down bowl, okay? And it's pronounced kem-t, kem-t. The E that you see in writings today is what Egyptologists use to make the language simpler. There's no vowels in any of the Kemetic languages or the Metu-Neter. Excuse me. and that cross is called a determinative. A determinative is found at the end of all these sentences. And what it did, it tells you what the idea of the sentence before it. Okay, so when you see these letters put together and they say Kemet, that means city or nation when you see that determinative. So that's how the full sentence will be for Kemet. That's how they wrote the place that they'd come from, the black land or the black nation. Okay? Now you might say, how could you say that? Okay, let's go to the next slide. This, what you see that look like a railroad track, that's the determinative. If you see a chem, or if there was a black land or the soil, they would use that determinative, okay, which means land or the ground. So when they use the other terminus that we come from Kemet, we come from the black nation. We come from the black land of the blacks. That's what they would use the previous slide, okay? If they were talking about the ground like you're being told, which is a lie by so-called scholars today, well, they talk about the soil and what the Nile brought because of the dirt, rich black. No, they would use that determinative. A determinative that tells you what the idea of the sentence before it means. Okay? Don't listen to me. I'm no Egyptian expert, but I know that when I do my research. Okay, let's go to the next one. Now, I always used to say that when you see a lot of people in today's society trying to justify certain things about what happened 200 years ago, or whether all people, Native Americans were black, or the Egyptians were this or that, you always see a painting or a picture. Okay, I know I showed you a picture of the letters because I wanted to make sure that they're sharp. But those pictures are not what I want you to understand. This is what's found on the walls of Kemet, okay? And you see what I'm saying. You see the burnt chip down near the left-hand side. You see the L, Chem, and you see the R, which is M, and you see the determinative, and you see the T, the bowl up above the determinative. And then you have the determinative there saying that this is Kemet. It's written in stone. Folks, you could go to Egypt right now and read that. Black land, the black people. And if you still don't believe me, let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is the image of Ramses III, or second, Ursa Ma'atra September. That's what he called himself. That's what it is, Cartouche, But I want you to show. I want to put his complexion compared to the brother from I guess Nigeria, further south. Okay, look pretty much the same. How they drew themselves, how they saw themselves. Let's go to the next one. Now this will blow your mind. Then you see those same two symbols: the burnt chip and the upside down bowl. Now, the determinative next to them, again, the determinative that says what those two symbols to the left of it means. Those means people. Black people. That's how they wrote when in context of themselves. We are black people. They would use these hieroglyphic symbols in that order. Okay? Kemet, the black, plus the people, male, female, the black people, not Egyptians. So they knew how they looked at themselves, how they talked about themselves. Why are we still arguing? Why are we still arguing? Well, they're telling you, etched in stone, that they know who they are. Go on. Let's go to the next one. This is the image of an Egyptian. Okay? Does he look white? But yet you have the OBM want to show that everybody from North Africa is considered white. I mean, this nonsense, this zeitgeist of racism, it still permeates all the systems that we put together. That's why we talk about systematic racism. The idea is embedded in the foundation of the criminal justice system, of the political system, even the military system. We were segregated. Even though we proved ourselves from Bunker Hill or Breeds Hill at the beginning of the revolution until, well, today. But we're still considered unable to fly planes or handle guns and all this kind of crazy stuff because we are black people. Let's go on to the next one. This is that image again that says black people was owed to this man. 12th dynastic period, 12th dynasty, King Senusret III. It's an ode to him. And that's where they got that carving etched in stone on a papyrus that said black people. And look at that man, that right there, the image of that 12th dynastic period. He doesn't look Arabic. Okay, let's talk about the Arabs. I want you to look at him when I'm talking about the Arabs, who are saying that Hart is wrong for saying the Egyptians were black, or that the images of Cleopatra that's going to be in that movie as a black sister is wrong. The Kemetic people that built those pyramids were thousands of years before there was even people coming out of the Arabian Peninsula. They came into being, they were invited in to get rid of the Romans in 600 I think in 39 AD. That's when the Arabs, who are still there, it's a long time, but they're still there, that's when they came into being, in control of Egypt, under a general that's, I think his name is El-Az, E-L-A-S, was a general that brought the troops in to help the Egyptians in 639 AD, kick the remainder of the Romans out of the land. But they decided to stay, and they decided to conquer the Mamluks. Okay, the only thing that they didn't build the pyramids. They're Arabs. They didn't build they don't look like them. They're not Queen Hatshepsut. Was not Arab. He was not Arabic. Did he look Arabic? The first pharaoh, or Per-Az, that's what they call themselves. They didn't call themselves pharaoh. That's a Greek name. That's what people do. All these invaders come in and change the name. We do it here in America. Okay. Mount Rushmore, the native people had a different name for. We call it Mount Rushmore. Lake Tana was called Lake Victoria. That's how, and then the mythology grows out of that. A new type of zeitgeist is established to benefit the conquerors. New idea of the age. And we still deal with the zeitgeist of black people not contributing anything when we have tons of evidence that people of African descent, before there was a Rome, before there was a Greece, before there was even a China, which was a bunch of different states, before the great civilization, the oldest, was run by people that look like us. Okay? But again, the only thing that, back to the Arabs, the only thing they built it was in I think in 641. They built a fortress, and that fortress was called Cairo. And they used the stone. Some of them used the stone from the Sphinx, the outer casing, to build some of the buildings in Cairo. Okay, they didn't build up; they destroyed, and they used it as a fortification to conquer the rest of Egypt, until a couple of hundred years later, then the Turks took over and took over. The Ottoman Turks took over Cairo. Then the English and the French, then the English took over after that, and that's why we have this admixture of people that look the way they do in Egypt. They were all mostly invaders, but like I showed in the previous show, Dr. Hefney shows that black people still exist that look like me, are Egyptians, that descend from those beyond ancient times. When he ruled the world, when black men ruled the world, black women, the oldest queen who had power in that area was in 2900 BCE, okay? So women ruled even that far back. Queen Hatshepsut, the first female pharaoh. Now, I'm gonna stop right here. I have more, but I'm gonna stop right here because it'll take maybe 2 or 3 shows to even go over something that takes a whole lot of time. So until next time, peace, hotep, bye-bye.